I was 8 the first time they left without saying goodbye. They were already packed. Coolers full of soda, duffel bags in the trunk, beach towels rolled and tied like little sleeping bags. I stood at the screen door barefoot, still wearing the swim goggles I'd slept in the night before, waiting to surprise them. I wanted to show them I was ready early, that I could be part of the trip this time. That I wasn't just the too young tag-along they always left behind, but the engine was already running. Dad backed out of the driveway while Mom waved at the neighbors. No one even looked toward the house. Not once. My name's Leah Morgan. I'm 27 now, and I still remember how sticky the linoleum floor felt under my feet that morning. How I stood there, holding a packed bag I had zipped myself, staring through the screen as the van rolled away. I was the youngest of 5. Not by a little, by almost a decade. Aaron, the oldest, was 18 when I was born. Beth and Caleb were already in middle school. Nina, the only one who actually talked to me like I wasn't a toy, was 6 years older. And me? I was the accident. The oops baby. The one who came too late to be part of any tradition, but just early enough to witness what it felt like to be excluded from all of them. Every summer, my family drove 5 hours north to Lake Pinewood, a little rental cabin tucked under pine trees by the water. The same cabin every year. The same week. It was tradition. A sacred week, as my dad called it. The whole family swore by it. They'd spend months planning. Group chats buzzing with grocery lists and game schedules. But I was never part of those chats. Or the packing. Or the trip. The first time they left me behind, the excuse was simple. Leah gets carsick. That was fair, I guess. I did throw up once during a church retreat. I was 5. But by the time I was 8, I had memorized the Dramamine instructions. I stopped eating 6 hours before car rides. I even practiced breathing through my nose and looking at the horizon like my pediatrician told me. Didn't matter. The next year, they said it was just easier for me to stay behind. "It's not that you're not invited," my mom said, smiling too much while folding towels. "It's just that you're not quite ready yet, sweetie. You wouldn't have fun anyway." She was wrong. I would have had the time of my life. I would have shared a bed with Nina and listened to Beth complain about mosquito bites. I would have helped Dad grill hot dogs, even if I didn't eat them. I would have tried. But trying didn't matter in my family. Only being convenient did. By the time I was 10, I stopped asking. I just watched. Every year, same pattern. Duffels packed, fishing rods loaded, hugs exchanged, except with me. I stayed with Aunt Melissa or the neighbor down the road. They'd leave me $20 for pizza and a fun week without rules. But no amount of greasy cheese made up for watching my family become strangers for a week straight every year of my childhood. There was one year when I was 12 that I tried to force it. I packed a bag, wore a life vest to breakfast like a joke, and asked Dad if I could come just this once. I said I'd sit in the way back and bring headphones. He didn't even look up from his coffee. "Not this year, Leah. Maybe next time." Mom shot me a warning glance like I was causing a scene. Nina mouthed, "I'm sorry," as she zipped her duffel. I just nodded and walked back to my room, face burning, heart splitting into that sharp, hollow ache that doesn't really go away. You just get better at carrying it. The worst part wasn't even being left behind. It was what they did when they got back. How they acted like nothing had happened, like I should have been grateful for the break. Dad would pat my head and say, "We'll take you when you're older, promise." While Mom unloaded bags of snacks from the trip and never once asked how my week was. At 14, I stopped waiting by the door. I stopped asking about the lake or who caught the biggest fish. I told myself I didn't care. I buried myself in books and online forums and YouTube playlists that made me feel like someone, somewhere might have understood what it felt like to be the last person thought of in your own family. But I did care. I cared so much it hurt to breathe every time I heard the sound of tires crunching gravel. What I didn't know then was that, one day, the cabin that held all their happy memories would go up for sale. And when it did, I'd be the one holding the keys. There's this quiet kind of grief that settles into you when you stop asking for something you used to beg for. I think I was 15 the last time I brought up Lake Pinewood. It was spring, maybe April. We were all at my parents' place for a barbecue. Well, they were there for the barbecue. I was just present. That's how it always felt, like I was an extra. Someone you keep in the background just in case you need to balance out the head count. Everyone was talking about that summer's trip. Caleb wanted to bring his new girlfriend. Beth was suggesting a bigger rental, maybe with a second fire pit. Aaron had just started doing drone photography and wanted to document the whole thing this year. I remember sitting there holding a warm soda can, pretending to scroll through my phone. Not one of them looked at me. Not one of them asked if I was coming. So I did something really dumb. I asked. I cleared my throat and said, "Hey, so is there space for me this year? I could help pitch in, even cook. I'm not bad at making stuff now." The silence was so loud I wanted to disappear into the grass. Caleb actually chuckled. Not in a mean way, just dismissive. Mom looked up from her potato salad and said, "Honey, we just assumed you had work or school stuff. You're always so busy." I wasn't. I was never that busy. But saying that out loud would have made me sound desperate, so I just nodded. That night, I cried in the shower. Quietly, like I'd practiced. No gasping, no sniffles. Just hot water and the kind of tears that feel like they're leaking from a part of you no one ever sees. After that, I stopped asking. I stopped trying. I stayed in touch, sure. Birthdays, the occasional family dinner, the fake laughs when someone shared an old inside joke I was never part of. I kept up appearances. But emotionally, I started checking out. It's a strange thing when you start noticing how much of your identity was built around trying to be included in something that never had room for you. I started building walls. Not the angry, dramatic kind. More like layers of insulation. I stopped volunteering information about my life. I stopped hoping they'd ask. And when they didn't, it didn't even sting anymore. Not right away, anyway. By 22, I was living in a small studio apartment, working part-time at a bookstore and freelance editing on the side. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was quiet. No one ignoring me. No one forgetting I was in the room. That was also the year I met Ethan. He came in to pick up a pre-order and ended up staying for an hour because we both hated the same author. I don't even remember how the conversation turned personal, but I do remember this one moment. We were walking past the travel section, and I made some dumb comment about how I'd never really been anywhere. He asked, "Not even family trips?" And I said, without thinking, "Only in my dreams." He stopped, looked at me and said, "Wait, seriously?" "Never?" I nodded, shrugged, tried to laugh it off. They used to go up to this cabin every summer, but I was always too young or too sick or too inconvenient. He frowned. That's messed up. No one had ever said that before. Not like that. Not like it was obvious. We talked more after that. We started seeing each other casually. Then, not so casually. And one night, after a bottle of wine and too many chips, I told him everything. The first time they left me. The time I showed up with a packed bag and goggles. The barbecue where they laughed it off like it was nothing. Ethan didn't say much. He just listened. And then he said something that stuck in my chest. "Leah, that's not normal. That's not just you were young. That's emotional neglect. And it sucks that you've had to carry it this long like it was your fault." I didn't say anything back, but I cried. Big, sloppy, embarrassing tears. And he just sat there and held my hand. After that, I started therapy. I didn't go in expecting breakthroughs. I mostly went because Ethan nudged me gently toward it, the way you coax a skittish animal out of hiding. But it helped. I started seeing patterns, started recognizing what I'd internalized, that I wasn't unworthy. I was just overlooked. Constantly. Systematically. And that left a mark. And then, one Tuesday afternoon, something happened. I was scrolling real estate listings for fun. Not seriously, just escapism, I guess. I liked looking at cabins. probably because they symbolized something I never got to have. And then I saw it. Pinewood cabin, for sale. Same wood paneling, same deck, same damn pine tree in the corner of the frame that I recognized from family photos. The cabin. The one they made 1,000 memories in. Without me. And it was up for sale. I stared at the listing for a long time, heart thudding like a drum in my chest. The price wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible either. I'd been saving. I'd always been saving in that quiet, anxious way people who grow up feeling disposable tend to do. And in that moment, something inside me clicked. I didn't feel anger. Not exactly. Just clarity. I could own the place they never let me touch. And this time, no one would leave me behind. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not even Ethan. I bookmarked the listing, then unbookmarked it. Then bookmarked it again. It sat in my tabs for 2 straight days while I went to work, answered emails, and pretended like I wasn't obsessively refreshing the page every hour to see if it was still available. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept picturing that pine tree in the corner of the photo, the one I used to trace with my finger on the back of old family postcards they sent from the cabin. They'd write things like, "Wish you were here," when they never really wished that. If they had, I would have been there. So yeah, I kept staring at that tree like it was staring back at me, like it had waited all these years for me to finally show up. And then I did something completely out of character. I called the number on the listing. The realtor's name was Greg. Super upbeat. Used the word charming at least 5 times in the first 2 minutes. "It's got history," he said. "Original stone fireplace, hand-built dock, family-owned for decades. Real piece of heartland living." He didn't know how accurate that was. We booked a showing for Saturday. When I told Ethan, he blinked at me. "You're going to see the cabin?" I nodded. "I don't know if I'll buy it. I need to see it. For me." He offered to come with me, but I said no. Some things you do alone. It was surreal pulling into that gravel driveway after all those years. The trees were exactly how I remembered from photos. Tall, whispering in the wind, like they were guarding something sacred. The paint on the porch was peeling now, and the front steps creaked like old bones, but it didn't matter. I stood there for a long minute before I knocked. Greg opened the door with a bright smile and a clipboard. "Leah, great to meet you. Let me show you around." I barely heard half of what he said. I was too busy listening to the quiet groans of the cabin itself, the way the floorboards gave under my weight, like it remembered me too. I ran my fingers along the wood-paneled walls, touched the back of a rocking chair someone had probably dozed off in during rainy nights. I walked through the hallway where family photos probably once hung, except none would have had me in them. There was a room with bunk beds that made my chest tighten. That could have been mine. When Greg stepped out to take a call, I wandered outside to the dock. The lake shimmered in that lazy, late summer kind of way. I sat down on the edge, let my feet dangle over the water, and cried for the first time in a while. Not the kind of sobbing that leaves you breathless. Just quiet tears, like my body was finally releasing something it had clutched too long. I bought the cabin 3 weeks later. It wasn't impulsive, though that's what my family would have said if they knew. No, I planned it out. Ran the numbers. Talked to a loan officer. Used my savings, my freelance income, the little nest egg my grandmother left me. And when the papers were signed and the keys were in my hand, I didn't post about it. I didn't send a message to the family group chat. I didn't rub it in anyone's face. I just drove up alone with a bag of groceries, a Bluetooth speaker, and the knowledge that I had finally stepped into a place that once told me I didn't belong. The first thing I did was paint the front door deep green. The same green I'd always imagined when I was a kid, staring at my crayons, wondering what color my room might have been if I'd ever had one there. Then I scrubbed every surface, not to erase the memories, but to reclaim them, to make them mine. The living room? I threw out the plaid curtains and bought soft, gauzy ones that let the light pour in. The kitchen? I replaced the old rusted kettle with a matte black one that actually whistled. Ethan came up the second weekend and helped me string up lights on the porch. When we finished, we cracked open beers and just sat in silence, watching the lake. "You okay?" he asked after a while. I nodded. "I think I'm starting to be." He didn't say anything else. He just reached for my hand, and we stayed like that until the stars came out. I didn't tell my family because deep down, I didn't want their validation. I wanted peace. But peace doesn't always last when your past has a habit of knocking on the door. Because late one night, right as I was getting into bed, my phone buzzed. Aaron. "Hey, someone said Pinewood Cabin got sold? Please tell me that's not a joke." I stared at the message, heart suddenly racing. How did they know? A few seconds later, another one came in. "Beth. Wait, did you actually buy the lake cabin?" Then Caleb. Then Nina. Just like that, the silence I'd built around myself began to crack, and I had a choice to make: respond, explain, or let them sit in the same emptiness they once left me in. The moment I saw Aaron's name pop up on my phone, I knew the honeymoon phase was over. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen, thumb hovering, heartbeat louder than it should have been. He didn't say hi, didn't ask how I was, just wanted to confirm whether the rumor was true, if I, the forgotten little sister, had really bought the cabin. Beth's message came next, followed by Caleb's, then Nina's. The group chat lit up like someone had thrown gasoline on a memory and dropped a match. I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, but because I didn't know what to say. What do you say to people who spent most of your life pretending you didn't count, only to show up the second they realized you had something they wanted? A part of me expected it to stop there. Like, maybe they'd realize I wasn't biting and move on. But no, Beth was always the persistent one. She called 3 times in one night. When I didn't pick up, she left a voicemail in that overly sweet tone she used when trying to manipulate people. "Hey, Leah. So funny story. Caleb mentioned you bought the cabin and we were all like, no way, that's hilarious. But seriously, we're planning the trip for next month and just wanted to see if it's available for the usual week. Let me know, okay? Miss you." Miss me? She hadn't texted me in 2 years. The next day, Mom called. It always escalates to Mom. "Leah," she said, skipping the pleasantries. "Why didn't you tell us?" I stayed quiet. This cabin, this place, it's part of our family. "No," I said calmly. "It was always part of your family. Never mine." There was a pause, like she didn't know what to do with the truth laid out that bare. Then she sighed, like she was the one who'd been wronged. "We all just assumed." "Exactly," I cut in. "You all assumed that I didn't want to come, that I was okay being left behind, that I'd just stay quiet. And I did, for a long time. But I'm done assuming you care." She switched tactics fast. "Leah, you can't just keep it from everyone. That place has memories, traditions. You don't throw that away." "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finally building something for myself." She scoffed, actually scoffed, and then dropped the line that really stuck. "Well, I hope you enjoy sitting there alone while your family's somewhere else making real memories." That one stung. I didn't cry, though. I just said, "I'd rather sit alone in peace than chase people who never made space for me." And then I hung up. That should have been the end of it. It should have died down. But they weren't done. A few days later, I got an email. An actual email from Caleb. Polite, professional, like he was negotiating a business deal. "Hi, Leah. I know things have been tense, but we were wondering if we could still rent the cabin for the week of the 10th to 17th. Happy to pay full price, of course. It would really mean a lot to the kids." The kids. He meant his kids. The ones who'd never even met me. The ones he brought to Pinewood every summer for Family Week, while I watched the photos roll in from 100 miles away. I didn't respond. I didn't owe him anything. So they started asking around. Through mutual friends, through extended family. Aunt Janice called out of nowhere, playing clueless. Sweetheart, I heard you've got the Pinewood place now. That's wonderful. Just curious, do you still rent it out? Your mom said you might be overwhelmed maintaining it on your own. The nerve. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was thriving, and I wasn't renting it out. Not to them, anyway. Ethan and I had spent the last month turning it into something real. We painted the bedroom soft sage and ocean blue, bought handmade mugs from the local market. I started journaling every morning on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the fog lift off the lake like a secret being whispered just to me. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming something I was never allowed to have. But then Beth posted on Facebook, a thinly veiled jab wrapped in nostalgia. So sad when family forgets the meaning of tradition. Pinewood won't be the same this year. But I guess same only matters to those who were part of it to begin with. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. But I saved the screenshot. That's the thing about people like them. They rewrite the story in real time. Suddenly I was the selfish one, the villain, the cold sibling who shut everyone out. They didn't talk about the years I spent watching the van pull away without me. They didn't talk about how I begged quietly for scraps of inclusion. They only remembered their version, so I wrote my own. On the first morning of what used to be Family Week, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, opened every window in the cabin, and blasted my favorite playlist out toward the lake. I laid out a picnic for 2 on the deck. Sandwiches, fruit, and a small sign that read, "Sorry, it's not available anymore." And when Ethan showed up, smiling and holding 2 paperbacks and a blanket, I looked around at the space I had built, the life I had chosen, and I finally felt full. I thought ignoring them would be enough. I thought that if I just held my boundary, didn't reply, didn't engage, didn't justify, then eventually they'd back off and slink away, forced to stew in their own silence like I once did. But people like my family, they don't let go quietly, especially when they feel entitled to something they never earned. It started small. Aunt Janice tagging me in old family photos. Then Caleb posting a throwback of the cabin from back when family meant something, followed by a passive-aggressive flood of comments from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. But it all came to a head when my mom showed up. Again. I was outside repainting the deck rails when I heard gravel crunch under tires. At first, I thought maybe Ethan had come early. But when I turned around, it was her. Mom, stepping out of a borrowed car with a tote bag and that same look she used to wear when I got a B in algebra, like I'd embarrassed her in front of the world. "Leah," she said, not even offering a hello. "We need to talk. You've made your point, but this has gone far enough." I didn't say anything. I didn't offer her water. I didn't invite her in. She took that as permission anyway and marched up the steps like she still owned the place. "I'm only going to say this once," she said, planting her tote on my kitchen table like a flag. "This behavior, this grudge, it's tearing the family apart. Caleb told me you threatened to rent the cabin to strangers instead of your own siblings." "I didn't threaten," I said, voice steady. "I offered it to people who actually respect me. There's a difference." She made that scoffing sound again, the one that always made me feel 12 and invisible. "You're being petty. What happened to you? You used to be sweet. You used to try." I set down my paintbrush. "Exactly. I tried. For years, I tried to belong, I tried to be included. And not once did any of you meet me halfway." She flinched at that. Only for a second, but I saw it. And then, just like always, she changed tactics. "Well," she said, suddenly composed, "you leave me no choice." She pulled out a manila envelope from her bag, set it down like a poker chip. I opened it slowly. Inside, a cease and desist letter, filed by Caleb and Aaron, claiming ownership interest in the cabin due to historic family association and emotional investment. I stared at it, not in shock, in disappointment. "This is a joke," I said flatly. "They're serious," Mom snapped. "You may have bought it, but you don't own the history. You don't get to erase everyone else. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. "You're right," I said. "I don't own the history, but I do own the deed. And I've got every receipt to prove it. So if they want to fight, let them. Just be ready to lose." And that's exactly what happened. Turns out, emotional nostalgia doesn't hold up in court, especially not when the ownership was 100% legally transferred to me, and no one else in the family had ever paid a cent toward it. Not for taxes, not for upkeep, not for repairs. The judge dismissed their petition in less than 10 minutes, called it frivolous. I didn't even need a full trial. The fallout was quiet, embarrassingly so. Beth deleted her Facebook post. Caleb stopped returning messages to the cousins he'd stirred up. Aaron sent me a text that said only, "You win," followed by silence. I didn't mind one bit. But the one thing I didn't expect was the email from Nina. Short, honest. She apologized. Not for everything, but for enough. Said she never realized how left out I was, how lonely I must have felt, and that she hoped one day we could start fresh. I haven't replied. But I saved it, not out of hope. Just acknowledgement. That sometimes not everyone gets cut out forever. Some people just need distance and time to face themselves. The rest? They never deserved a key in the first place. I think the biggest thing I've learned from all this is that closure doesn't come from hearing, "I'm sorry." It comes from finally choosing yourself without apology. Some people will only start to value you the moment you stop begging for it. And by then, it's already too late. If any of this hits close to home, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Maybe you're still waiting at the door like I used to. Or maybe, just maybe, you've already started building your own version of the cabin. Either way, thanks for sitting with me through this. And if you want to stick around for more real stories like mine, go ahead and hit subscribe. No pressure. Just an open door this time.